Ready.
Through you, Mayor, to all of Council, I can confirm that we are live streaming.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to those who are viewing virtually. Welcome to this evening's City Council meeting on March 21st, 2022. Beginning March 1st, 2022, the City of Kitchener has aligned with provincial changes to COVID-19 restrictions, and City Hall is now open for in-person services, but appointments are still being encouraged. The City of Kitchener remains committed to the safety of our patrons and staff and continues to facilitate electronic meeting participation for members of the public. Those individuals interested in participating in this meeting could register to participate electronically by completing the online delegation registration form at www.kitchener.ca/delegation or via email at delegation@kitchener.ca. For those who are interested in accessing the meeting live stream video today or in the future, it's available at www.kitchener.ca/watchnow. Any written comments received prior to this evening's meeting have been circulated prior to the meeting to members of council and will form part of the public record for tonight's meeting. As we begin this evening's meeting, we'd like to do so by acknowledging that today we gather on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. We recognize our responsibility to serve as stewards for the land and honor the original caretakers who came before us. Our community is enriched by the enduring knowledge and deep-rooted traditions of the diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit in Kitchener today. Colleagues, I'd now like to take a moment to acknowledge the past 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic. Without question, the past 2 years have been really tough for all of us. As you know, this month, there are several noteworthy days marking the COVID-19 pandemic. March 11th marked the 2-year mark since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. March 17th marked the 2-year mark that the province of Ontario originally declared a state of emergency in Ontario due to the pandemic. And this Friday, March 25th, marks a 2-year mark that we here in Waterloo Region declared a local emergency in relation to the pandemic, and also marks when we'll be ending the emergency orders in the City of Kitchener. Over the past 2 years, we have been through a great deal together, Council, and the fact that we have gotten through all of this as well as we have, I believe, is a direct result of the resilience and caring community spirit of our community, our ability to work collaboratively together as well as we have as a council, and the collective leadership of our CLT, EOCMT, and our overall staff teams. I want to take this opportunity tonight to publicly acknowledge and thank each of you as members of council for your commitment to public service in our community, and to our staff teams during what has been one of the most challenging periods any of us have experienced during our individual and collective time in office. And I also want to thank you for your support to me personally during this time period. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Dan Chapman, our CAO, who served as the chair of the CAOs group on the Regional Pandemic Control Group and leading our own pandemic response, Michael May, who worked alongside Dan as Deputy CAO and overseeing things here at the city, our entire corporate leadership team, our EOCMT, and all staff throughout the corporation. I could not be prouder of our staff team for the sacrifices made and all that was achieved in serving our residents and businesses. I'd be remiss if I did not thank and acknowledge Regional Chair Karen Redmond, CAO Bruce Lochner, and all of our colleagues on Regional Council for the spirit of collaboration they brought to our shared journey throughout this region. Lastly, but certainly not least, a special shout out to our community, a sincere thank you. Thank you to each and every one of you for the sacrifices you made so that we can be at this point today when we're looking forward to a more positive future. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, the story of Kitchener and our region has seen its share of sorrow and fear. Across Waterloo Region, residents have lost loved ones, lost their livelihoods, and lost important connections to friends, family, and colleagues. We have stayed apart out of necessity, but sometimes we've seen that distance grow into deep-rooted division. Now that we are moving forward toward our new normal, I'm confident that we can begin to heal and move forward together as a community. Our collective journey has shone a light on our shared humanity and the power of our own resilience. We've been through a lot, both collectively and individually, but we must now move forward towards our shared future together with a renewed sense of optimism. We can never forget that over the last 2 years, there have been countless moments of hope, humor, inspiration, and creativity that have energized us. We've come to appreciate the simple things in life: family, friends, our health, live music, and so much more. We've also come to appreciate our essential workers, our healthcare workers from hospitals to long-term care homes, our first responders, our many volunteers, and so many others. Those moments, coupled with our community's barn-raising spirit, will allow us to yet again move forward and get to a new spot together. But for now, we need to remember to proceed slowly and cautiously as we ease out of the pandemic. COVID-19 is still circulating in our community, and everyone has different comfort levels when it comes to being back in person and taking off our masks. The coming months give us much to look forward to. Renewed sporting activities, gatherings with family and friends, postponed weddings, live theaters, festivals, and so much more. Treasure each of these moments as they return to our daily lives. Let's continue to be patient and kind as we move forward and adjust to our individual comfort levels and health circumstances. I'm optimistic that we're headed toward a spring and summer of community reconnection and positive memories that will re-energize us as a renewed and stronger community. And now, colleagues, I would like to ask that we take a moment of silence to remember those who did lose their lives during both in this region and around the world over the past 2 years of the pandemic. Thank you. Bear with me one moment. On motion by Councillor Dave Schneider, the minutes of the regular meeting held February 28th, 2022, and the special meetings held February 28th and March 9th, 2022, as mailed to the mayor and councillors, have been accepted. Actually, do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Marsh, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Sorry, just one moment. Councillor Singh.
Mr. Mayor, for 30 Francis Street South for their official plan amendment zoning application, my family and I own a property very close to proximity to this development proposal. So I will recuse myself from the decision. Okay, thank you. That is duly noted. And if I can ask the clerk to make me a co-host so I can manage the hands as part of the process. Thank you. We'll now note there are no communications referred to file, and now we'll move into presentations. Colleagues, as you're aware, today is the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Kitchener is a vibrant community, and it's exciting to see our diversity grow.
Our differences are an important part of what makes this city a great place to call home. Now, more than ever, we have new opportunities to learn, share, and connect with people who add vibrancy and cultural knowledge to our city. However, diversity is not enough if we hope to create an inclusive and equitable city that welcomes, values, and creates centered spaces for all races, cultures, and creeds. In order to move toward an equitable city, we must refuse to accept silence and inaction and commit to self-education and intentional actions that bring about measurable change for marginalized groups. This International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, we acknowledge that an anti-racist approach is necessary if we're to identify, disrupt, and dismantle racism. An anti-racist approach requires us to take an active and intentional philosophy that directly counteracts racist actions, policies, and systems. At the City of Kitchener, we're committed to intentional work towards anti-racism within our organization and our community. This past February, we launched the RISE Fund, a grant to support Black, Indigenous, and racialized groups. In addition, our new Equity and Anti-Racism Advisory Committee began meeting. We implemented a new equity, inclusion, and anti-racism policy. We're rolling out anti-racism training for all of our employees, and we're implementing equity-driven recruitment practices. Today, on March 21st, we joined the Immigration Partnership and all of the communities of Waterloo Region as we stand against racial discrimination. We do have two delegations with presentations for today's International Day. And the first one are two members of our Equity and Anti-Racism Advisory Committee, Sharon Van Manen and Saba Oji. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you very much.
And welcome, Saba. I think you jumped in there. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, everyone, the mayor and the council for having us. My name is Saba Oji, and as you met my colleague Sharon, we're both part of the Equity and Anti-Racism Advisory Committee, and today is the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. So before we jump into this day and what this day means to us, I would like to mention about who we are and what we hope to achieve as a committee. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we're both part of the Equity and Anti-Racism Advisory Committee. Next slide, please. The committee consists of 12 individuals from diverse backgrounds and lived experiences. We're eager to work closely with the city to further enhance its equity, diversity, and inclusion work. Collectively, we will enact responsibilities to support the work of the equity, anti-racism, and Indigenous initiatives. We hope to serve as a link between community, the team, and the city to address anti-Black, anti-Indigenous, anti-Asian, and among other forms of racism. The name of the current committee members are on this slide for your reference. Next slide, please. So what is the purpose of this committee? The purpose of this committee is to encourage and support the grassroots community involvement of the Mayor's Task Force as we continue to develop and implement equity and anti-racism work. As I'm sure you're aware of the Mayor's Task Force, so I won't go into too much details. However, I do want to highlight the 8 areas where the task force will be focused on, and these include, please, next slide. Staffing model, policy, training, demographic data collection, communications, hiring, recruitment, community funding program, and youth mentorship program. Next slide, please. The committee has many responsibilities, and these include advising the council on equity and anti-racism issues, to provide feedback on EDI initiatives, along with identifying community priorities in this area. We also serve as a conduit to the larger community and support with the EDI and anti-racism issues across all the departments at the city. And lastly, we serve as a selection committee for the community grant program. Next slide, please. Our mission is to collaborate closely with the city to enhance the EDI strategies and condemn any racist act to ensure that the citizens at the City of Kitchener feel safe, included, and valued. Our vision includes implementing an anti-racism, equity, inclusion, diversity, and accessibility lens to every action we take. And we represent not only the diversity in the background, but also in the mindset. And lastly, we want to be the voice for our community members. The list of our values are short, but are very important. This committee is very action-oriented, and we put a huge emphasis on collaboration, both within the community members, but also with the City of Kitchener staff and the council. And we finally value representation and equity for all. I will now pass the torch to Sharon, who will discuss about the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination and how this committee fits into this vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Saba. My name is Sharon Van Manen, and as a brown female, I have experiences of smashing my head against glass ceilings and ramming up against racial barriers. I have been a resident of Kitchener for almost 5 years, and sadly, my experience in Kitchener has been no different. Today brings me hope. Today is the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Today marks the day of the Sharpeville Massacre, which occurred 60 years ago. For many years, many South Africans peacefully protested apartheid law, including the Pass Law. The Pass Law forced Black South Africans to carry a pass at all times. The National Party, which was elected in South Africa in 1948 by a minority, exclusively white electorate, used the Pass laws to control the movement of Black South Africans, restricting where they could live and work. On March 21st, 1960, thousands of South Africans marched to the Sharpeville police station in a peaceful protest, refusing to carry their passbook. Simon Makato, who participated in the protest, recalled the atmosphere was cheerful, people were happy, singing and dancing. After some time, military jets were flying overhead, and police officers in Sharpeville opened fire on the peaceful protest, killing 69 people, most of whom were shot in the back as they ran for their lives. Next slide, please. The system of apartheid, the Afrikaans word for apartness, divided people into 4 categories and denied rights and freedoms to anyone who was not considered white. The 4 categories were white European, native Black, colored, and Indian Asian. Of importance to note, 15% of the South African population were white European, and they stood at the top, wielding power and wealth. 80% of the South African population were native Black, and they were relegated to the very bottom. Next slide, please. This year's theme of the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination is Voices for Action Against Racism. Next slide, please. Actually, I think I need to go to the next slide as well, please. The Equity and Anti-Racism Advisory Committee are here to take action against racism. The committee's energy and creativity, our talents, our thoughts and ideas should be going into solving challenging problems rather than guarding ourselves against racist and othering aggression. Our goal is that Council will acknowledge our strengths and involve us in decision-making processes. Next slide. We acknowledge that although unwritten, the principles of past laws continue to exist today, still restricting where certain people can live and work. For example, for decades, we have seen how zoning bylaws and restrictive covenants have worked to keep parts of North America cities white, relegating racialized and other marginalized groups to specific segregated areas, baking inequality into our housing system. Racialized and marginalized groups are disproportionately overrepresented in low-income neighborhoods and underrepresented in middle and high-income neighborhoods. Another example, a study released by Ryerson University Diversity Institute in July 2020 analyzed the diversity of companies in Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, and Toronto in 2019. Of 1,639 board members from 178 corporations, the study found just 13 Black board members. That's 0.79% white, while white members held 1,483 spots. That's 91%. Other racialized members held 61 spots. The only way that cities can be inclusive is if there's mixed tenures and incomes across all communities. We cannot continue to build communities where we have pockets of deep poverty and pockets of extreme wealth. How can we do this? Let's create pipelines. Government departments and corporations can do more to prioritize internship opportunities for marginalized students, giving them valuable work experiences early in their career and preparing them for work in all sectors. The fight and struggle for equality, justice, and the right to the city is one that continues to push for greater inclusion of all voices and perspectives in formal planning processes. The Equity and Anti-Racism Advisory Committee was created for this purpose, and we are committed to upholding this initiative. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much to both of you for tonight's powerful presentation, for your work on the committee, and for representing the committee this evening and making this presentation. Are there any questions for Sharon or Saba? Councillor Michaud.
I don't have questions. I just have comments. So if anybody has a question first, they can go.
There aren't any other hands up, so go. Sorry, is that a question, Councillor Singh?
No, also a comment.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Michaud then.
Okay, I want to thank Sharon and Saba for a powerful, short but powerful presentation. As you were presenting, I started to think of a quote from Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And your presentation and your ambition and your willpower to persevere this is very commendable. I also want to add that our Safe and Healthy Advisory Committee with the city works on a wide range of topics that affect the health and safety of our community. As part of their work plan, the committee has been doing the necessary research to bring forward a plan to develop an access without fear policy, which I will be bringing notice of motion forward to council in next month in April. So thank you, ladies, and I support you all the way. Wonderful work.
Thank you very much, Councillor Michaud. Councillor Singh, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick point of encouragement. I'm going to overreach and speak for my colleagues, but to you, the committee members, be emboldened and of course, fight the good fight, and know that at every corner, you do have the full support of this council and of course of our staff as well. So looking forward to the recommendations that you would bring forward that obviously further improves the community. So thank you for committing to do this work, and look forward to seeing what comes out of it.
Thanks, Councillor Singh. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Saba and Sharon. That was a very good presentation. I do actually have a question, and that is regarding your involvement as a committee in the other, we taught you, one of your slides referred to the housing, inequality in housing. So will you be presenting to other sectors of the city, other groups within the city, to sort of reiterate your position on equity and anti-racism? And maybe it's too early to answer that question, but
I was going to say that.
Big yes.
I think we're just getting started with the committee. We've only had two meetings thus far. Our third meeting is coming up next week. So we're still trying to figure out the parameters of the committee, what we're going to be doing. So I'm very excited too to find out where we're going to be involved and how we're going to be involved.
well, I hope it extends beyond just the committee and infiltrates into other parts of the city organization. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for coming in, and I want to thank all the members of your committee. I'm really looking forward to what's to come of this. I know in some of our early anti-racism training, I was inspired to get a book by Ibram Zendi called How to Be an Anti-Racist. And one of the points in the book is anti-racists acknowledge there are differences between races, but these differences aren't responsible for inequities. Policies are. So I'm looking forward to finding out which policies we're going to change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Schneider. Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Saba and Sharon, thank you so much for coming in tonight. And Sharon, I really appreciated the statistics and that you shared. I think those are so important. And I think that we need to be hearing about how our neighborhoods are built over and over and over again. I know it's something that's on my mind constantly about different areas within my own ward, for example. And I think that during COVID, we were really shown about disparities in terms of the case counts and things too. There's so many pieces in terms of the social determinants of health and that we should be looking at in terms of our neighborhood. So I'm excited about the work that the committee is doing. I'm looking forward to working with you. I think the more that we have these really good and honest conversations within our community, the better that it's going to be for our community as a whole. So thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for the work of the committee, and I look forward to working with you further.
Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, I was reflecting earlier today about how if it weren't the pandemic, we would have had in the rotunda, like we normally did, a whole group of people in the rotunda talking about the different aspects of this day and the meaning of it. So thank you for bringing it forward tonight by a virtual method, but hopefully next year it will be in person again. And I just want to acknowledge in this meeting, Jihan Sabri, who has been working on this bringing forward awareness about this day and bringing folks together for years. I'm so glad to see the work of her and many others continue on and strengthening here at the City of Kitchener.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor Marsh. So that appears to be all the comments. So Sharon and Sab, I just want to thank you once more for coming tonight, for signing up to be on the committee, for the work that's been done, and no doubt the heavy lifting that's still to be done in the months ahead. Please pass on our thanks to the rest of the committee, and as you've heard, we're all very committed and looking forward to working with you in the months and years ahead as we work to build a better community for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next presentation on the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination is a group of students from Grand River Collegiate Institute. And so I'd like to welcome Jasmine Wangi, Ayesha Munir, and Chiharu Sanada Williams. And I hope I pronounced those three correctly. And if not, I'm sure I invite the opportunity to be corrected. And I turn it over to whoever's going to start speaking. Welcome to all three of you.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Chiharu Sanada Williams, and I'm one of the co-presidents at Grand River Collegiate Institute. Today, we wanted to talk about how we feel our city can fight against racism and end discrimination. I wanted to discuss the importance of having people of color in positions of power, such as teachers, principals, coaches, and more. We realize that people get hired based on their skills and abilities, but we also urge you all to see that having people of color in these positions can make youth feel more comfortable. From our personal experiences, we believe students feel more comfortable talking to teachers about racially motivated experiences when they know their teachers truly understand what they're dealing with. Some people are incredibly privileged to not know what racism feels like, so we hope you can understand that it can be very difficult talking to someone when you know they have very little connection to that issue. It can also be incredibly deeming to go through life and have no role models that look like you. It can make kids feel like they don't belong and like these positions will be harder to achieve for people of their minority. Teachers of color can make students feel more welcome and encourage diversity within schools and classrooms. Before COVID-19 hit, Grand River Collegiate had an incredible assembly for Black History Month that the Black Student Union ran, which students and staff alike enjoyed. The assembly helped people understand the importance of Black History Month, and students were allowed to ask the guest speaker any questions that they had. We hope that things like this can be implemented in all schools to encourage everyone to educate themselves and learn the importance of diversity. We also need to realize that saying something is better than saying nothing at all. Sometimes we don't know what to say, don't want to make a mistake, or will say something wrong. The education system should implement ways to help students feel more comfortable to say something out loud. We should be able to trust teachers and know that they'll discipline the people who act upon racist or discriminatory views. It can be extremely harmful on youth when peers in their school community face zero repercussions for their actions. Whether it's microaggression or blatant racism, it stays with people of color their whole lives. These are not instances we can forget and just move on from, but memories that never leave us. We are aware that we can't focus on these negative memories forever, so instead, we strive to work together to end the chain of youth in our community experiencing the negative effects of racism or outdated views. Now, my fellow classmate Jasmine will speak to you about her experiences as well.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jasmine Mwangi, and I am part of Grand River's Black Student Union. I just joined Grand River Collegiate September of 2021, and for the most part, I have to say this is the most diverse school I have ever been to in Canada. However, I still see underrepresentation of students of color at the schools. To be honest, unlike most colored children or youth in Canada who have probably dealt with racism their entire lives, I was only introduced to this cruel reality when I moved to Canada in 2018 from Kenya. I was only introduced to this cruel reality when I moved here in grade 9. My last school before Grand River was, let me just say, not the most diverse school, and I used to live by one rule at that school. Keep your mouth shut and you won't get more attention than you already have. Being one of the 5 colored students at the school made me think I was already bringing more attention than I wanted. I was new to the country and the school. The last thing I wanted was people's eyes on me. And that's when the harsh reality of racism started to hit me. I was always underestimated because I was Black. I was constantly asked if I wanted to drop an academics class or if the work was too heavy. At first, I thought my teachers and my guidance counselors were concerned. But when it was consistent, that's when I realized they're judging my academic knowledge based on my skin and not my abilities. Every term it was, no, I'm good. I actually enjoy the class. No, I like the challenge. I had to try so hard to prove that I am fine in the academic classes. When I reached grade 11, that's when I started to grow tired of this constant questioning. But I still kept my head down and just tried my hardest to explain that I'm fine with the challenge. That was at my last school. When I entered grade 12 at Grand River, I was happy to see that my guidance counselors were not questioning my classes or whatever level they were, whether academic or applied. But with grade 12 comes the stress of post-secondary school and all that stuff. My counselor was of great help, don't get me wrong. But when I partnered with another counselor who was of color from another WRDSP high school, I felt more comfortable speaking about my worries. How do I get into post-secondary as an immigrant? Where do I start? As a Black student who had no idea how university and college worked in Canada, it was somewhat comforting that I could speak to someone who was of my color, Black, and had almost the same experiences. The difference between speaking to a white staff and a staff of color may not seem like a big deal to maybe an adult, but to me or any other youth of color, it's such a big difference. It can change our entire perspective of the topic, especially if the youth may be new to the school or is an immigrant. The point of this being, as an immigrant, it's already difficult trying to navigate a new lifestyle, let alone school. Having a counselor of diversity makes the biggest difference, and it's important to realize not all college students have the same experiences. Not all of them have navigated racism for a long time. It can be something completely new, and they may not have a single clue what to do when it does happen. It's incredibly crucial that they know a staff at their school can help them navigate these things because they have the experience. I can't say I know what all immigrant high schoolers may go through, but I do know when they know that there's someone of their ethnicity or race at their school, there's some relief, and that relief can mean so much. Thank you for having me, and now I'll pass it over to my fellow classmate, Aisha.
Hi, my name is Aisha Manir, and I'm the other co-president from Grand River Collegiate, and I'm also part of the Anti-Racism and Equity Committee for the City of Kitchener. I am proud that Shaharu, Jasmine, and I could be representing youth voices in our community at this meeting today. I have dealt with racism for most of my life, but it began to be more evident when I started wearing my hijab in grade 10. Being called a terrorist and being told to go back to my country were often phrases that I would hear throughout my time outside or at school. Sometimes it's microaggression and other times it's blatant racism. When it's microaggression, no one notices. Oftentimes I would look around the room hoping that someone had caught on to what was said, but I would be met with blank faces. When someone had said something blatantly obvious, I would look around the room and have people staring back at me, like it was my job to somehow correct everyone, even though everyone knew it was wrong. Oftentimes when this would happen, I would also look to teachers or adults in my life, and I would see that they were also silent. And in times like this, silence speaks volume. Racism is not a sustainable way to live. However, racism itself is sustainable. The things we do or don't do in some cases, and the things we say or don't say can have an immense impact on the people around us, and especially our youth. Many of us feel the need to be so perfect because we don't want negative stereotypes to be portrayed about our race or religion. For example, I know that I don't represent every Muslim in the world, but sometimes it sure does feel like it. I can try my hardest to represent my religion of peace and kindness, and I can try my hardest to be the perfect Muslim, but I never want to have the burden of being the perfect person on my shoulders as well. I cannot be the sole example of my religion to people that have never interacted with Muslims before, and I refuse to be perfect because other people don't feel the need to educate themselves and unlearn the things that society has taught them. Just like other people, I am human and I can make mistakes, but my mistakes don't validate my religion or Muslims all around the world. I think there are definitely steps we can take to ensure that other people don't go through this. And I believe we need to talk about discrimination and racism in younger grades thoroughly because they have impressionable minds. We can go a long way if we teach them about what is right and what is wrong. And yes, sometimes these discussions can be very uncomfortable. And you might be sitting there and you might be a little bit uncomfortable as well. But so what? Being uncomfortable is one step forward. It's one step closer to educating ourselves and then implementing what we learn into our lives. I want to encourage all people of color to stand up, speak up, and take up space. We belong here just like everyone else, and the negative things we experience are not normal, but the emotions we feel are definitely valid. As a society, we feel like we have come so far, but have we really? If children and adults alike still feel racism in workplaces, schools, and other public areas, places where we should always feel safe. I encourage everyone to check their privilege and realize that things need to change. False promises and performative activism just can't cut it anymore. And if you think racism is not a problem because you've never experienced it or you've never seen it occur, I need you to reevaluate how lucky you are. Some of us have to actively keep our guard up because we never know who can say what. This is not the way I or anyone else should ever be feeling. We have come a long way for sure, but we still have a long way to go as well. I will never stop fighting against racism, and I will always make sure to stand up, speak up, and take up space. I will no longer keep my head down and ignore the disgusting things that are said to me and other people. I will always say no to racism. My hijab is an important part of my identity and reminds me to follow my dreams beyond the limitations that society has placed on young Muslim women like myself. And like Nelson Mandela once said, no one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Chaharu, for 3 very powerful presentations this evening. for your work, Aisha, on our committee, and to the three of you for your leadership and your work in your school and in the broader community, raising awareness around anti-racism issues, and more importantly, bringing the youth voice to it, because I think that's so incredibly important, particularly as we strive to build a better community and a better world going forward. Really appreciate you coming out this evening. Councillor Schneider, you have a question or a comment?
A little bit of both, Mayor. Thank you so much, Aisha and Jasmine and Shara, for coming in. Very moving. I'm still processing. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us here at Council, because I think, what you've experienced in your life so far in a school setting can be applied to a lot of things here in the city with our community centers and our programs and just the way we do things. So I really appreciate you presenting to us. And I just wondered, will you be able to present this same presentation to the school board trustees? I think it'd be really great for them to hear this as well.
I believe that the student trustees, they were also asked to be a part of this, but if we get the chance, we would love to. But I know that we were in contact with them, so they know what we were saying, and one of them also submitted a video as well, so we are in tabs with them as well.
Yeah, I think it would be really great for you to actually present at a meeting in front of the trustees and let that be in the public as well. So I'll just leave it at that, but thank you so much.
For sure.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Schneider. Councillor Michaud, you're next.
Thank you, through Mayor. I want to thank all three ladies for a wonderful, powerful presentation. I really believe that you're the generation that's going to make the change. I think you're all articulate. You've been through so much in a short life. Actually, you're not that old, so I'm really very proud of you, and I look forward to hearing from you a lot more as the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Michaud, and then Councillor Singh, you're up next.
Yeah, I'm just so impressed with the way you guys presented. And I'm so proud in your strength of how you were able to share your personal stories. Some of it kind of saddens me a little bit. I myself came when I was 8, and that was a point of time where there were far less, even more so, of people of color in Kitchener. In some cases, I was maybe one or a few of the entire school. And I shared some similar experiences growing up. And that's why I say that it saddens me that even many years after that, our youth are still having experienced similar circumstances. And that's why it's so important with the work that this committee will do. But more so, I'm just so proud and inspired by the resolute strength in your voices. So just keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you so much for coming in tonight. Aisha, what you said, stand up, speak up, take up space. You guys are doing that, and thank you so much. And thank you for coming to teach us. We're obviously a lot older than you are, but man, can you teach us lessons? And I'm so thankful. Please keep telling your truth, because you're right. When you make people uncomfortable, it makes people think. And that's exactly what we need to do. So I'm very thankful for your presentation tonight. And I always say we're in great hands with our younger generation. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. And as has been noted, one member of their delegation wasn't able to attend this evening, and that's Kenzie Sorer. But a video has been submitted and has been forwarded by our clerk to members of council to view later on. So once again, I just really want to thank you, Chiharu, Jasmine, and Aisha for being here this evening, for taking the time, and for inspiring us to do more and to do better for you and for future generations. Best wishes as you continue your work in the months and years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, we'll now move on to the delegation section of the meeting. I do want to remind delegations that they have 5 minutes to make their presentation. You will notice that we have a new tool in our virtual meetings to assist us to help folks out with that, and that's the clock. So I would ask folks to use that to help guide them in their presentations. And our first delegation this evening is a representative from the Grand Watershed Trails Network. And so I'd like to welcome Anne Crow, and you have 5 minutes to make your presentation. Welcome this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's my presentation. Can we move to the next slide, please? So I'm very pleased to be talking with you this evening. Just to give you a very brief background, we appeared before council in 2017, and our concept was endorsed. So the basic idea is that we want to create a network of connected trails that follow the Grand River. The river itself is a major trail within the system. And it's not just about trails, it's about bringing people to the things, the history, the heritage, the culture, the nature that's associated with the river along the length of the river from Dundalk all the way to Lake Erie. Next slide, please. So what we've been doing now is we've come up with a proposed route, and we're asking all the municipalities in the watershed, consulting with them about the route. You can see that we now have a connected route that goes from Dundalk to Lake Erie. The blue circles are the access points to the river. As you can see, there's a lot of them, and the little red circles are warnings of dams and places where you have to portage. And we have a new website. This map is on the website, and you can zoom right in and see exactly where the access points are. Next slide. So I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of the entire trail. So it starts in Dundalk. There's not much in the way of multi-use trails through this area. So it goes on quiet country roads right past Luther Marsh. There's a short trail at the Upper Grand Trailway. Next slide. From Bellwood Lake, where you can put your canoe in the water if you wish, we take the route of the Trans-Canada Trail, which includes the Elora Cataract Trailway and the Cottontail Road Trail, which takes you to the Kissing Bridge Trail. I'm going to skip Waterloo Region for a couple of seconds and just complete the trail. Next slide. So from Cambridge, there's two amazing multi-use trails, Cambridge to Paris Rail Trail and then the SC Johnson Trail into Brantford. We came up with a route, and then Brantford and Brant County suggested that we do a loop. So we now have a loop that goes up both sides of the river and includes some interesting historical sites. Next slide. So the final section takes us down to Lake Erie. There's a section on busy Highway 54 where that apparently is going to maybe have some cycling infrastructure. We're working with Six Nations to maybe put a loop through Six Nations at some point in the future. And then Haldimand County has suggested another loop, and that we go down both sides of the river to Port Maitland. So next slide. So the big question for Waterloo Region was, how do we get from West Montrose down to the Cambridge to Paris Rail Trail? Next slide. So the two alternatives that come immediately to mind is Walter Bean Trail, which I'm a big fan of and hope that one day it will be completed. But it's incomplete in Woolwich, and there's issues in Kitchener, as your staff has told me. So for now, we've decided to go with the Trans-Canada Trail, which takes you on the Iron Horse Trail, takes you through St. Jacobs, and then down into Cambridge. So there's a lot of advantages to doing that. Next slide. So we talked to Waterloo, and they've come up with a loop that actually includes the Walter Bean Trail through in Waterloo. Next slide. And then we went to Cambridge, and they suggested a loop up the Speed River Trail, and Guelph in their new master plan is planning an on-road trail from Guelph to Hespeler and connect a better connection to the Kissing Bridge Trailway. So that puts in some loops. And if you add in the next slide, if you were to add in eventually completing the Walter Bean Trail, you can see that we would have an amazing network of cycling trails in our region. Next slide. So this is the slide of the Waterfront Trail, and you can see how we could connect with the Waterfront Trail and create a network within Southern Ontario. I'm going to basically skip the rest just to say that we have a new website, which is www.grandtrails.ca. And I invite you to take a look at the website and zoom in on the maps and see all the interesting things that are available in the trails. So I'd be interested in your comments. There's just a few pictures of from the website.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Anne, for a really informative presentation. I mean, you know, I think notionally was certainly aware of many of these trails, but until I saw everything on the map connected the way you brought it all together, I have to say it kind of blew me away, to be honest with you, which is absolutely fantastic. We do have a question for you, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, and maybe this has already happened, but has this been shared with council, your presentation? And if not, would you be willing to share it with us?
I have shared it with your clerk, so I believe it should be in the minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Chapman, for asking the question, and we'll make sure that it gets circulated to council afterwards. I do want to also acknowledge that Anne, in fact, was on our committee that worked on the Cycling and Trails Master Plan. And so while this was a great presentation this evening, it's also an opportunity to publicly thank you, as well as others who were part of that process, and really appreciate it. You know, it's so important to have people that bring passion and expertise to the table, and clearly you've got both, which is wonderful. I don't see any other questions, so I'll just ask one, and that's: has there been much dialogue yet with Explore Waterloo Region, our regional tourism entity, to really, you know, start thinking about how, as we look at all these linkages, how potentially we can work just within our own regional tourism district or with others to really create some tourism offerings for people, you know, particularly, excuse me, I think about years like this year where, you know, the Ontario government is encouraging, you know, tourism in Ontario. Has there been any discussion about that?
Actually, I have a meeting with Explore Waterloo Region tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. So yes, we are talking to them. This project was actually done in cooperation with the regional tourism offices. There's 3 of them that represent the watershed, and they've been trying to get a Grand River focus across the whole watershed for quite a time. So they're extremely supportive of what we're doing.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, I know we've RTO4 has been doing some great work, and we've been able to partner with them in terms of some canoe launches on the river and stuff. So really some amazing opportunities here. Anyway, thank you again for coming in this evening, and really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay, we'll now move on to our next item, which is DSD 2022-089, which is 7.3.B, pertaining to 890 to 900 King Street West. And Miss Andrea Sinclair and Jody Wacko are here, the consultant and a representative of the proponent, to answer any questions if council has any, and staff are here as well. Are there any questions? If not, if I can ask, is that a question or you want to, yeah, go ahead, Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, thanks very much. Sorry, it wasn't quick on the draw to get my hand up. So I do have 2 questions. So first of all, you know, there was some discussion at the last Planning and Strategic Initiatives meeting, and then after that, about how can we make sure that the laneway is passable, and it will be more heavily used once this building is built. And so members of the community are looking for assurances that Dodds Lane, which is the laneway behind the proposed building, you know, be for all intents and purposes extended to the edge of the building, onto the property line, and would be basically parallel with it, so that people using it would be able to use it onto the property as well. So I just want to ask for confirmation that that will be the plan from the developer's perspective.
So I don't know, is that a question more for staff, Councillor Marsh, or for the applicant or the?
I'm just asking the applicant for confirmation that they're aligned with that plan.
So maybe we can ask Ms. Sinclair. Welcome.
Hi, good evening, everyone. And I believe Jody might be on as well if he wants to elaborate. But yes, that is the plan. We've had extensive discussions since committee meeting with transportation staff, and we're doing all the necessary survey work. But we are committed through site plan to make sure that that lane functions properly. And it's been made clear that site plan approval in principle will not be provided until it's demonstrated that we can make it work. The pavement will extend to the building, and if need be, it may result in additional setback, but we're confident that there will be a way to make it work, and we're working with staff, and we'll continue working with staff through the site plan process.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. My second question is, it would be for staff and for the applicant. It's just to it is more for staff, Mayor Urbanovic.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, so it's just regarding the commitment that has been verbally made by the proponent to ensure that affordable housing is included in their development. They have committed to 5%, and they have additionally committed that if for some reason their community amenity for the Grand River Hospital Foundation somehow doesn't work, that they would commit additional affordable housing units. But we don't have an easy way for us to make that commitment tied to the registered on title or whatever it would be, to make sure that it's a commitment for long term. So I'm asking staff, can you make sure that we are able to put something more formally together to make sure that this commitment is solidified in writing?
Mr. Stevenson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's something we can absolutely keep you apprised of and keep council updated on. It is typical that once affordable housing arrangements can be secured through agreements, it's typically closer to a shovel-ready or groundbreaking time, not this early in the process. So we will absolutely keep you informed and be able to work through that as part of the site planning process.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I really, I appreciate again all the work that has been done to date on behalf of, council by our staff. I really appreciate all the work that residents have put into thinking through their perspectives on this site and some of the challenges that they've made clear, so that we can make even a better building. And so I'm really pleased to see this before us tonight, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. Those are all my questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Marsh. I know you went into comments there, but I figured I'd let you do them now as opposed to later. Councillor Chapman, I believe, you can bring forward the recommendation on behalf of DTS committee.
Okay, so it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Marsh.
No,
That
it would be seconded by your vice chair.
Okay, I just thought because it was in her ward. Okay, sorry. Sorry, by Councillor Singh. That item 7.3
point B.
7.3 point B. Sorry, I'm sorry for being so. From the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee meeting of March the 9th, was it March 9th? Yes. Be adopted.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Singh. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Moving forward, then we'll now move on to 30 Francis Street South, and that's DSD 2022-08-9, as well as 2022-062. I'll note that there have been 4 written submissions received from Chris Pigeon, GSB Group, Evie and Milo Mazan from John McDonald, and from Innate Development. And we have one delegation registered for this item this evening, and that's Mr. John McDonald.
Thanks very kindly, Your Worship and members of council. I'm just assuming that you can hear me. I'm not present on screen.
Yep. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
So thanks for the opportunity to speak to you once again this evening, specifically regarding the information that I put before you with respect to your planning decision at 30 Francis Street South. Once again, I'd like to disclose that if council approves this development this evening, the value of my home and property, which is located in the Innovation District and the Urban Growth Center, will likely increase in value. So in light of the information provided in the interim between approval at committee and this meeting, I'd ask that council carefully consider how the decision will fulfill its duty to our community, and specifically to the requirement of the provincial policy statement that planning authorities minimize the cost of housing. I have provided 2 documents to all members of council as attachments to an email sent to councillors and mayor at their individual city email addresses. I believe the documents inform council with new information regarding the application before it, and that it was in the public interest for me to make them available to councillors. I indicated that in that email that I would try to delegate at this meeting in order to answer any questions that council may have regarding the documents or their implications. One of the documents shows where the development community wishes to take us in the upcoming years. It does not and will not lead to affordability, in my opinion. As with similar commodities and tradable assets, I believe that supply will be managed in the interest of investors and higher pricing rather than the interest of people and their needs. The city itself has noted that there are near 20,000 housing units approved in our community, and even more region-wide, that remain unbuilt. I believe they are being managed by the industry in pursuit of their own interests, and these interests include evaluation of the potential for larger profits from delay in delivering these units to those who need them through mechanisms which control price and supply. More specifically, the pricing published in the document I have provided seeks to establish, or indeed expects, a housing cost within 4 years that is approximately 70% higher than the present average in the downtown Kitchener condo real estate market. This comparison is based upon collected data regarding condo apartment sales pending sales and active listings in the fourth quarter of 2021 and in early 2022. This is no solution for affordability or for our community, and planning on the basis of projects which seek to move pricing and deliver zone change windfalls to investors in this way does not, in my opinion, conform to the requirements of that policy statement. The second document provides councillors with information and corrects certain misrepresentations from previous delegations on this matter. An example of this would be the statement made at committee that construction costs have tripled in the last 4 years. The document assists councillors with new information to help answer questions raised by councillors at the committee stage. It informs your deliberations regarding this and similar developments as to their ability to minimize the cost of housing and fulfill community objectives rather than investment objectives. I ask that members of council consider the implications of this approval, your direction and apparent embrace of this type of planning, and what this means for our community. We cannot plan on this basis or pander to the landscape of investment model that will provide affordability via trickle down. We should not be bonusing on the basis of this model, given the information I have provided to you. This council meeting began with a formal acknowledgement that we are stewards of land included within traditional territory of our First Nations. I ask that council not only say such words, but act upon them. The wonderful presentations from Saba and Sharon, Aisha, Jasmine, and Shiharo should be your guide. We must plan in each and every neighborhood and in each and every development to avoid these silos and monocultures. Our downtown and our major transit station areas are the place to accommodate the diversity of people and services that will enrich our community as exemplars of the way forward. Thank you very kindly for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. We do have a couple of questions for you. Councillor Gazzola.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McDonald, for presenting again, and also for all of the information that you provided all members of council with. I want to start off by just asking you to really, if you could explain again what you see as the provincial policy statement dealing with land use planning systems. In your letter to us, you did outline that, and I think it deserves being repeated.
Through you, your worship, to the councillor, within that provincial policy statement is an overriding vision. The vision states that strong, livable, and healthy communities promote and enhance human health and social well-being, are economically and environmentally sound, are resilient to climate change. Within policy 1.4.3F of that statement, which must be complied with, there is a duty, I believe, in that planning authorities shall provide, among other things, establishing development standards for residential intensification, redevelopment, and new residential development, which minimize the cost of housing and facilitate compact form while maintaining appropriate levels of public health and safety.
Thank you. Along those lines, in an earlier presentation, you stated that thanks to projects like this current project, the price of land in downtown Kitchener has escalated from $5 million an acre to $25 million an acre. Has anyone challenged your figures on those figures?
Through you, your worship, to the councillor, no, they have not, to my knowledge.
And what is wrong with that?
Once again, through your worship, we need to build around our major transit station areas, and we need to build within our downtown a diversity of uses and mix of options, including projects which are mid-rise and which fulfill the kind of vision that long-term planners of our community have created within the Innovation District corridor and elsewhere, and that keep us in touch with human scale. The revised land use and land pricing effectively means, in my opinion, that we will be tall and sprawl, that towers are going to be, based on approvals, the thing to do, and they will be single use throughout our downtown and our major transit station areas. And I don't think that's appropriate, Councillor.
Thank you. You also presented us with some estimates that you had calculated with even some professional help, I expect, that actually showed the costing for this project, which had certain assumptions and whatever, but it showed what kind of revenues that this project would bring in, what kind of costs are involved. And you also indicated some estimated rates of return. Did you mind if I ask you what those rates of return were?
So my apologies through your worship to the councillor. I don't believe that I can put that in the public realm myself. The reason for this is that when we do so at some risk. As members of the public, we do not enjoy the kind of status potentially that others at a council meeting would enjoy. My apologies.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments for that. And I do understand the jeopardy you could put yourself into. I would like just one question. In your letter that you sent out to us today, you mentioned that the housing costs will increase considerably, 70% higher. Can you just expand a little on that?
So this works forward from one of the documents of which I am not the author that you have in your possession, which indicates the per square foot price, that is the asking price that is owed to the VIP investors presently. And I have data that has been given to me regarding the present sales and pending sales for condos within the downtown. And essentially that data indicates that present sales, although pricey to some degree, are just below $700 a square foot. And the sales that are anticipated by this development are more in the $1,180 a square foot range, and thus the 70% increase. It's projected that this development will come online in 4 years, so we've got 4 years to get there.
Thank you. I have one further question. If you want, Mr. Mayor, to allow me one further.
I'll let you ask that one so that we don't need to come back. Go ahead.
Yeah. On these large, tall buildings, the biggest thing we're hearing from opponents usually deal with the compatibility of these buildings in the neighborhoods to which they're being constructed. Now, that has not been your major concern. Could you just briefly outline what is your major concern with this project?
Thank you kindly, Councillor, through your worship to the councillor. My major concern is that the project is investor driven and puts too many links between community members and citizens who are going to live in the project and the economics of it. And with profits taken at each of the links, I think we're going to inflate rather than minimize the cost of housing. And I think we're going to be creating, as has happened in other communities and that other communities are learning from and trying to move away from, that each of the towers is a kind of monoculture. Your earlier presenters this evening were much more eloquent than I regarding the need for accommodation of diversity in a very, very impactful way in each and every corner of our community.
Thank you. I will have a comment at some point, Mr. Mayor.
That's fine. I'll come back to you, Councillor Gazzola. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Mr. McDonald, for coming in. How do you respond to the argument that we need more housing to respond to the housing crisis, even if they are mostly one-bedroom units, but we just need to keep building up and up and up? And you may want to frame your response in terms of equity, given the earlier delegations.
Thank you, Councillor. And once again, through your worship to the Councillor, my opinion regarding this is that we are essentially turning our landscape over into a landscape of investment rather than one of community. And we need to focus in on breaking the kind of silos and breaking that so that we achieve equity for those who cannot afford the price points that are anticipated by this development and by the management of the supply. So there's a lot of talk regarding just supply, and we need more supply. The fact of the matter is, as Mayor Verbanovic and other mayors of the community, published in the record as they approach the provincial kind of affordable housing summit, that we have 20,000 units that are being held. And tonight, council is going to make a decision that lays a kind of certain golden egg, and that egg is going to be managed. It moves from theoretical to being an actual asset, and that asset is traded, that asset is managed, and it's managed through certain lenses. And those lenses come down to, if we sell it tomorrow rather than today, can we make more money doing so? And so I think the supply side is certainly part of the equation, but the side that says our community needs better and the principles involved mean that we really need to look at these developments in a different way.
Okay, I just have one final question, and that is, how do you see the proposed development at 30 Francis related? How does it relate to the data that you've shared with us?
So I have shared very specific data with respect to 30 Francis with council.
Right. So in the context of the development in the downtown core, and your argument around why we need to have more mid-rise density and et cetera, and highlighting the 20,000 unbuilt units in the region. How do you tie that directly into what's being proposed at 30 Francis?
So there are certainly other models, and my apologies. I noticed that I have now been given the ability to turn on my video, so I shall do so. There are models, and we are involved with projects here in the area where dollars are placed directly and more forcefully at the service of construction rather than at the service of investment. And we are at mid-rise and low-rise accomplishing excellent densities that far exceed the targets required. We are preserving heritage as we do so. We are preserving front yards and gardens and space, within our wards and our neighborhoods in our community while bringing that density. And we're doing it at a quality which, quite frankly, I believe to be higher. The project I refer to is meeting the CMHC investment guidelines that place a much higher bar with respect to the quality of construction than would appear to be the bar that has been established, even with the sustainability bonusing and the other bonusing that has been put forward for 30 Francis.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions, and I will have comments.
Okay, Those appear to be all the questions. Thank you, Mr. McDonald, for coming in this evening.
Thanks very
Councillor Chapman, if you can bring the actually, you know what, just before you do, maybe I would just ask Mr. McDonald's still there. If I can just, is he still? I think he's left. So maybe I'll ask a question of either Ms. McDonald or Ms. Bustamante. Mr. McDonald's referenced emails where he has shared data with council, but wasn't prepared to discuss them in the council meeting. I'm just wondering, you know, in the interest of transparency, the appropriateness for council to be using them in their deliberations this evening. Mr. McDonald, you may want to comment on that before staff does, since you're back in now. Did you hear my question? You're muted. There you go.
My apologies. No, in the transition from panelists.
Yeah. So my question, Mr. McDonald, was in the interest of transparency. I'm just wondering. You know, a couple of people have asked you questions with respect to the information that you shared with council, but you have felt that it wouldn't be appropriate for you to speak to the information, and I'm just wondering about the appropriateness for us to use that in our deliberations, both from your perspective and then I guess I would ask that question of staff.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, for the opportunity to clarify. I have provided that information to councillors. I have not done so from the point of view of saying that it is privileged or confidential information. That is relatively deliberate. But those of us in the public who come before council to debate matters of development are not shall we say, in the same position that councillors may be. So far be it from me to direct councillors in terms of how they might wish to deal with the information. I've taken the steps that I believe that I can, and would likely leave it at that, if that's an acceptable answer, Your Worship.
Oh, that's fine. So I guess I would turn to our staff in terms of just from a appropriate planning point of view. Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
You're welcome.
Mr. Reedman, I guess you're going to take it.
Yeah, through the mayor. So it's difficult for staff to answer the question because staff weren't copied on the email correspondence. And so staff have not had a chance to review or vet the information that was shared with council. What I will say is when staff does consider a planning matter, they read and consider the whole Planning Act in its totality, not cherry picking certain policies to use as arguments. And so it's making sure that that an application stands on its own merits from the total Planning Act perspective.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reedman. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Vandenbeck. Since it's been emailed to us, can we just not email to the clerk and then it'll just be a matter of public record?
I don't know the answer to that question. Ms. McDonald.
Perhaps I can assist. Mr. Reedman's quite correct. We don't have benefit of the material to know exactly what the information is that Mr. McDonald's talking about. So don't forget, council has an obligation under the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act to protect certain information. Mr. McDonald has said he hasn't declared it confidential or that he shared it on a confidential basis, but whether or not he says that still we still have to look at the information to determine if there's any content of that information we have an obligation to protect in law. So I can't give you advice, without knowing what that information is. And typically we would give you that advice in caucus. So I just caution you that there's a whole bunch of questions that arise as a result of Mr. McDonald sharing that information and somewhat protecting it.
Okay. It doesn't seem to be valid anyways, in my opinion, but that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so with that, Councillor Chapman, if you can bring forward the recommendation, please.
Yes, it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Singh that
It
items.
wouldn't be seconded by me.
It can't be Councillor Singh because he has a conflict. So
Okay,
did somebody want to second that, please? Who wants to second it? Councillor Ioannidis, thank you.
By Councillor Ioannidis, that item 7.2.a from the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee meeting of March 9th be adopted.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Davey, comments?
Yes, sorry, just one quick question of staff and then comment if I could.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, just my quick question of staff. Is there a rental housing shortage in Kitchener?
Wants to take that? Mr. Reedman.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, our manager of real estate has been looking at the overall rental market, and I believe we're hovering around 2%, which is viewed as an unhealthy rental supply.
Thank you. And was I first in line for comment as well, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, great. So I'm not going to reiterate my comments with respect to the supply and demand discussion that we had last week. It's been very clear with data from Statistics Canada that that we definitely have a total supply shortage, and supply and demand's been understood since the 1600s. In any respect, what wasn't really covered, and I guess something that's been bothering me a bit lately is two things. Number one, the people that build buildings like this, residential buildings like this, once they decide to condominiumize them, they can't decide whether someone's going to buy it and live in it or buy it and rent it. And one thing that bothers me a little bit is there's groups out there with a particular agenda that use the terminology exclusively of speculators or investors. Well, you know what? Speculators and investors aren't buying up all the units in an apartment building and leaving them vacant. These people are also renters, and we have a massive rental issue, as far as I understand, in Ontario, that's also tied to the supply issue. So if we're going to use the word investors and speculators, I think we also need to be careful that those units that are being bought up by investors and speculators are also renting these units. Not that, like I said, not that the people that actually construct these buildings have any say in that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Councillor Davey. Councillor Ioannidis, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Urbanovic. I'm very happy to support this development. In fact, I think it's probably one of the most significant projects in our community that has given back more to the community than any other development since I've been on council, which is almost 12 years. Like you're looking, and not only that, it's literally, I don't know, 50 feet, 50 meters away from, or 100 meters away from the transit hub. It's basically right in the most appropriate area where you want density. Like the developer is committed to building it, a lead, is committed to, he's over and above and beyond providing at least 500K worth of electrical power for vehicles. I mean, above 19% of the units are going to be barrier free. You have something like along the lines of 875K being donated to the St. Peter's project for affordable housing. You have $500,000 going to be built for the park, the urban park right beside. I mean, the project to me is single-handedly, quite impressive in my mind in during a time when we're having a housing crisis. And, you know, it always seems like the evil words of investment or anything in this time. So like, yes, developers are going to make some profits, but at the end of the day, we still need the supply, because if they don't build it, no one else will. So we have to keep continuing to go along with whatever type of developments we can get. And again, the developer never proposed that he was building this property for affordable housing. That's not his expertise, their expertise, and that's why there's that significant investment with affordable housing. So I'm very happy to support this in this development. Not only that, it's in the most appropriate spot, in my opinion, for intensification.
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis. I actually should probably be going, and my apologies, colleagues, for not doing that earlier. Should have gone back to Mr. Stevenson, because in fact, there was an email earlier today with a revised recommendation to reflect some of the issues that were left outstanding from committee last week. So Mr. Stevenson, if you can share that formally as part of this meeting, and then presumably that's the motion that in fact has been moved and seconded. So Mr. Stevenson, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to highlight 3 additional changes to the site-specific zoning bylaw that is being proposed for 30 Francis. You'll note that the bylaw has been amended 3 specific areas based on discussion at PSIC 2 weeks ago and following discussions with the applicant and with the file planner. We're recommending an amended bylaw, so paragraph 3 of section 776(2), that it be amended to add accessory amenity uses as a prohibited use on the ground floor. You'll recall that that's in response to some of the concerns we heard about not having adequate amount of commercial on the ground floor facing both Francis and Charles. This amendment to the bylaw would alleviate and resolve that concern. Paragraph 3 of the same section 776 sub 3 has been amended to add a regulation to have a minimum of 250 square meters of non-residential commercial floor area. Effectively, what that does is allows all the non-residential uses to be permitted on the ground floor, and then would not permit any residential or amenity uses. Again, strengthening that provision to ensure that those commercial uses are provided on the ground floor to ensure that we have an active streetscape. Following a request from PSIC of Council, paragraph 3, section 7764 sub G has been amended to add a regulation to require 28 parking spaces, which are designed to be EV ready. You'll recall that the developer has committed, and the bylaw already requires a minimum of 20 electric vehicle parking spaces. So those are with all the infrastructure involved. This additional requirement requires 28 electrical vehicle ready spaces. So that's ensuring that as demand rises for additional electrical vehicle parking spaces, that those 28 can be easily converted. We also had some discussion about the balcony encroachments within the right-of-way. The file planner, Mr. Dumark, did follow up with our operations as well as our operations staff and confirmed that we cannot have balcony projections within the right-of-way. Following that information and discussions with the developer, they are redesigning the podium to have inset balconies where possible to ensure that all units do have private amenity space. And that's, of course, in addition to the exterior amenity space that's being proposed on the 7th level. As this bylaw is amended through the statutory public meeting process, we also recommend that paragraph D be added to the resolution, stating that pursuant to the Planning Act, section 3417, that council changes the proposed bylaw that was originally attached as Appendix B to DSD 2022-089 as amended by council, and where council has determined that no further notice is to be given in respect to the changes to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Again, those 3 changes to the bylaw have been agreed to by the developer and stem directly from discussions at PSIC.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stevenson, for bringing that forward. Councillor Chapman, so I presume the motion that you brought forward that was seconded by Councillor Ioannidis is reflective of those changes?
certainly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gazzola for comments.
Yes, no, thank you. I'll start out by making a comment that won't surprise anyone, in that I won't be supporting this this application. And when the time comes, I would ask that we have a recorded vote. And just a few comments, if I could get through them. You know, we have and continue to deal with new high towers throughout the city. And as I mentioned, in most cases, the opponents have argued that the towers are not compatible with the existing neighborhood. But this isn't the case here. The opponents, as pointed out by a number of delegates, relates to the types of building that they don't really meet the requirements of the provincial policy statement. And that calls for strong, livable, and healthy communities which promote and enhances human health and social well-being, and at the same time are economically and environmentally sound and resilient to the climate changes. I don't believe, and it's been pointed out, that that's the case here. And this is what a number of people are objecting to, not the shade and the traffic and all of those other issues that we normally hear. My biggest concern is with the escalating costs that this type of project is fueling. You know, a lot of it hinges on bonusing. There was a time when I was on the other side of the fence, and one could not ever even whisper the word bonusing without our legal staff being all over us to explain that we can't bonus anything with anybody at any time. We can't have a leg up on another neighboring municipality. But those days are gone. Now, we were provided with some estimates, an opinion of a delegate, and that was just there were estimates. There were estimates with a lot of points as to how the estimates were arrived at. I spent a great deal of time on the weekend reviewing it, and I found the estimates to be very reasonable. And I think I've had enough accounting practice in my years to go through a process like that. And when I see the figures, and even if they're liberal, they produce in my mind what are excessive profits for this type of venture. Okay. Now, it's not a crime or illegal to make excessive profits. Nothing wrong with that. If I was on the other side of the fence, I would strive for that. And governments really can't dictate the size of profits. I appreciate that. Now, governments can have some impact on them, in that you see our senior governments impose income taxes when they see what they feel are excessive profits, and they impose income taxes that help benefit the rest of our society. And we live within those impositions of income taxes. In this case here, I believe that we as a municipality could have imposed a lot of things that would help the rest of our community, and at the same time leave the developers with a good return of profit. And incidentally, that profit that is calculated not only goes to the developer, but it goes to the people all along the way. There's a huge profit that's made on the original sale of the land. That's gone to someone else other than the developer. There are huge returns that go to people that loan the developer money. So there are huge amounts of profits that are made by a lot of people in this process. But the bottom line is we're left with a new level of high cost of living, a new level of high cost of living that has to be there to feed all the profits along the way. So I believe there's a lot more we could have asked for. Could ask for a whole floor of affordable housing. Could ask for a 3-room school. Things that the community that live there could really use. So to make it really mixed use and livable. The way it is now, it's not livable, and large cities are starting to see that. So I say I won't support it. I want to close by reading a recent quote from the mayor of Aurora, who is fighting and trying to get rid of the Ontario Land Tribunal. And he's done a great deal, and I think we need to listen to it. But a comment, and it's his comment, I can't take credit for it, but it's a really important comment. He states that profit-driven planning doesn't build our communities. It only builds someone else's bottom line. And that is the case here. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Gazzola. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. So at first glance, a tall building at 30 Francis Street doesn't seem out of place. It's close to the proposed transit hub, as has been mentioned, the LRT, downtown, and is not back onto residential properties. My position on most development proposals is to stick to the current zoning. However, in this case, the zoning is D6, Warehouse District Zone, which permits 2.0 FSR, commercial and light industrial uses, rear yard setback of 7.5 meters, and maximum front yard setback of 2.0 meters. Turning this into a mixed-use development makes sense, however, for this empty parking lot. So I'm not proposing that we stick to a 2S FSR. Of course, a 44-story building is not compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, as it far exceeds the height of the tannery, far exceeds the height of the U-Haul building next door. It far exceeds 1 Victoria Street, which has 19 stories, and Charlie West, further down the road at 34 stories. Just to mention a few of the nearby buildings, there are many other 1-story buildings in that area. Moreover, I have great concerns about the bonusing justification, and I would say this is my biggest concern, as it seems like an arbitrary height increase without any grounding. According to my calculations, which I draw from bylaw 2019-01, which I realize was never passed by council, the increase in size should be limited to 5 or 6 FSR, plus the residential dwelling units, community benefits that might give another 1 or 2 FSR. All told, the building would then have an FSR of 7 or 8. This is a substantial difference from the 18.3 being proposed. According to the provincial policy statement, the City of Kitchener is required to increase its density ratio, that is people and jobs per hectare, in the urban growth center to 200 by 2031. According to our recently released 2021 annual monitoring report of the Kitchener Growth Management Strategy, we are already at 212 people and jobs per hectare. The city's official plan raised the density goal to 225 people and jobs per hectare by 2031. This does not include 30 Francis Street or other developments that will come our way over the next 9 years. The report also says that if we were to build within the current zoning bylaws in the UGC area, we would have the potential to add another 122 residents and jobs per hectare. That's just doing it at the current bylaws, not at what might be modified or amended as new development proposals come forward. That would give us a total density ratio in the UGC area of 334 people and jobs per hectare, way above our density goals and that of the province. I emphasize the within the current zoning part of that clause. Under the current zoning, 30 Francis Street would be allowed a 2 or 3 story building, for example. And of course, nobody is suggesting that we keep it at that. Although I'm very pleased to see the proposed bylaw amendments, I will not be supporting this proposal for the reasons I've already mentioned, but also because I feel we should take a big breath, slow down, and figure out the UGC and MSTA zoning plan and green space plan, rather than reacting to each new proposal that comes our way on a piecemeal basis. While it is true we can't require affordable housing or LEED certified buildings, we can say no, as one of the delegations reminded us in his presentation at the PIC meeting on March 9th. We as the council are the only ones with that power to say no. Let's get our ducks in order before the development options in the UGC are exhausted. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor Ravanovic. As the guy that grew up in Kitchener, I've seen a lot of growth. I've seen new subdivisions going up, Forest Heights, Huron Heights. We've grown new subdivisions. We've grown as the city has grown, as demand is growing. And we're at a point now where we need to grow up. You know, we're coming up to election time and we're all going to hear about holding the countryside line, which we all believe in. We have a situation now where our downtown is growing. Right next to, close to Francis Street, we're going to have the Innovation Arena. We've got employment downtown. We've got offices downtown. We've got the LRT. We've got transit. We need to look forward to where our city will be in 20 years. How do we want to grow? Where can we grow? What's the best way to grow with the LRT? You know, how do people want to live? Not everybody wants to live in the suburbs with a big yard and a car. We've heard people who don't want to have a car. They want to get somewhere, they're going to take transit. They'll take a taxi, they'll Uber, they'll rent a car if they want to get away for the weekend. We need housing options and good places to build them. And I think this will be a development that's in a great place for a lot of intensity. And as our downtown continues to grow and evolve with more employment, more amenities, it's going to be a great place to live. I don't buy this comment that high rises aren't healthy for the people that live in them. My mother lived in a high rise, and there was a great community inside the building where they would share meals together and get together. So you can have a community within a community. So I just, you know, I understand the opposition. I understand it's a lot of change, but we do need to provide great options for people to live. And I think this building delivers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schneider. Not seeing any other hands up. I'll make some brief comments. I will be supporting the application that's before us. I think it's important to remember that this application has been through a thorough review with our professional planning staff, including community engagement. There were a variety of issues that were considered, some amendments that came forward both during the last meeting as well as amendments that have come forward this evening. I think, as has been pointed out, our community is growing. If one wonders about that, one only needs to go out to Councillor Galloway Seelock's ward to see the growth that's happening quite rapidly in greenfield development. But we know that that doesn't meet the needs, as Councillor Schneider has said, of all of our residents, and B, that our greenfield land supply, particularly if we're going to continue to preserve our countryside line, means that we need to grow up instead of out. There's no question that this means that we need to consider a variety of things, but we also know, and there's been comments made around the fact that some of these units are going to be rental units. Well, rental units, just by their very nature, means somebody owns them and somebody rents them. And if we're going to have those to meet the needs of our community, that is going to be the reality. So either those rental units are owned by small individuals, individuals that use them as an investment, as maybe as part of their retirement or whatever, or they're owned by large REITs. And in my mind, I'd much rather see a lot of small independent people owning them than large REITs that are just focused around, quite frankly, amassing as much real estate as they can and managing it that way. I think the other thing that, in my mind, that we can't lose sight of is that there is a housing shortage and a rental housing shortage in our community. We know that, for example, there are thousands of available jobs in our local innovation sector that companies are trying to recruit for. One of the challenges is housing. We also know, for example, and we just had a meeting as a group of heads of council dealing with the Ukrainian situation recently. And prior to that, the Afghan situation. And we know that there is housing supply needs in the community to deal with people who are looking to come to this community. And at 2%, we're not able to meet the needs of our community as it continues to grow and respond to those pressures. And so we need to be able to see a variety of housing choices being made available. Do we need more in the deeper affordability space? Absolutely. And we're working hard with our provincial and federal government partners to see that happen. We're working hard both at a staff level and in terms of our advocacy, in terms of things like, looking at inclusionary zoning, and hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll see that coming forward. And so in the meantime, I think it is important that we continue to rely on the professional expertise of our staff team to consider these applications, to consider community input, and as a result, make decisions based on the information presented in a transparent way by all parties concerned and put before us, that's had the opportunity for response and review by staff and all parties concerned. So those are my comments. And Councillor Johnson, I see you've put your hand up now.
I did, and thank you. As I've been listening to this conversation, I think it's really important for us to, frankly, think back a couple of weeks ago to when we were having the discussion about places like Belmont Village, which are looking at growing. And frankly, that is a place where we had a lot of pressure to not be going up farther, and where we really do need to be looking at more of a missing middle piece. And I think that piece is important, because where this is the perfect place to be putting a tall building. It's where our LRT is. It's where our staff is recommending. If we're not putting it in places like along the LRT, we are going to need to be building up a lot higher in areas which haven't traditionally seen a lot of that particular type of growth, and we're going to need to be doing it in more residential areas. So to me, this is the perfect place for us to be putting taller buildings and putting more density, is in our downtown, around our LRT, where it's meant for. So I agree with the staff recommendation here, and those are the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. So it has been moved by Councillor Chapman and seconded by Councillor Ioannidis with the noted conflict. So I will do a recorded vote. And I know I get asked to mix things up periodically, so I'll start on the back end this time around. Make sure I'm doing this right. Councillor Marsh.
I don't think it's called the back end. I think you
Okay.
need to find a different term for that.
Okay.
But I'll let-
Affirmative Ward 10. How's
Yes.
that?
I am keenly in favor. I didn't make comments, but I'll just say keenly in favor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Marsh. Councillor Chapman.
Opposed.
Councillor Johnson. Councillor Johnson, you're muted.
Sorry, in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
In favor.
The noted conflict from Councillor Singh, so we'll skip over him. Councillor Galloway-Sealock.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Michaud.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Gazzola.
Keenly opposed.
Councillor Schneider.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Davey.
The front end is in support.
Thank you. And I'm in support as well. So the motion carries. Thank you to everyone who participated in this process from a delegation point of view. Thank you for coming in again this evening, Mr. McDonald, and for those who wrote in this evening. And thank you to council for all of your engagement on this issue. We'll now move on to the next item on today's agenda, and that is pertaining to the comprehensive zoning bylaw, and that's item 7.3.a. We have two written submissions, one from Alina and Jan or Juan, I'm not sure, Salomes, apologies if I pronounce that incorrectly, as well as a written submission from Larry Kotzeff and Ron Geisler. And then we have one delegation this evening, and that would be Amanda Stellings.
Good evening.
Welcome,
Can everybody
Amanda.
hear me okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Vrbanovic, members of council. My name is Amanda Stellings. I'm a planner at GSP Group. We're representing Thomasfield Homes, respecting the property at 658 Sterling Ave South. You may recall Tom McLaughlin from Thomasfield Homes was actually at the March 9th public meeting, and his request was to remove the property from the stage 2B Crosby zoning exercise and to retain the existing R2B zone. And that's the same request I'm here today to speak to you about. We have submitted letters to the city, and we've also discussed our request in detail with Richard, who I understand is supportive of the request as well. The reasons that we are requesting that the property retain the R2 zone is that it is a residential zone, and the proposed rezoning would result in removing the existing permissions for the landowner. It's also a bit unique in the sense that the property was previously used as a landfill in the 40s and 50s, along with the adjacent city-owned lands. Thomasfield Homes, along with the City of Kitchener, did undertake a phase 2 environmental site assessment in 2005, and it did identify that significant remediation would have to occur due to the contamination from the landfill use. The environmental report also identified that it would be about $600,000 to remediate the site, and the remediation would require that the vegetation be removed. In light of this, it is our opinion that the natural heritage zone is not appropriate, as the vegetation would need to be removed for the remediation. And as I previously noted, the zoning would remove the existing residential permissions and have a significant financial impact to Thomasfield Homes. We do understand that staff is supportive of the request, and we just respectfully request that council support an amendment to the proposed bylaw to exclude 658 Sterling Ave South from the stage 2B Crosby zoning project and to retain the existing R2B zone. Thank you, and I can answer any questions that council may have.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for coming in this evening. And I don't see any questions from council, Ms. Stellings.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if I can turn it over to, oh, sorry, I do see a question now. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thanks, Mayor Vrbanovic. It's not a question to Amanda. It's a question. It's just pertaining to for clerks, because we have an updated list for 7.3. So I wanted to make sure that's out there.
Okay. So I will first ask Councillor Chapman to bring the motion forward, and then I'll ask clerks to share the updated list with us. Thank you for that, Councillor Ioannidis. So Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Singh that item 7.3.a from the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee meeting of March 9th be adopted.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Chapman. And if I can ask staff to share the information that Councillor Ioannidis spoke of. Somebody want to speak to this or from staff? Mr. Kelly Ritz.
Yep, through the mayor to members of council. So this was the motion brought forward by Councillor Ioannidis at the March 9th committee meeting. It includes addresses related primarily to NHC zoning, who have requested either removal of the NHC zoning on their property and replacement with the residential zone on it, as well as deferral for 27 Sunbridge Crescent and deferral of prime agriculture AGR1 lands to the south of the city along New Dundee Road. So this motion reflects all of those changes with reference to specific addresses and legal descriptions and whatnot. And I can give any more clarity as needed.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that, and for the work that's been done to bring this this added clarification forward. Councillor Davey, you're first up.
Yes, thank you. And I just wanted to, thank staff. They did include a property in the ward I represent, 27 Sunbridge, that I don't think was in the original council document, but is here, so that's good. But my question is, it's deferred to a future stage of Crosby. We haven't identified that, but I assume that this particular property then would be deferred to when those other, I guess, like the same time as the Skippa lands come back. Is that true?
Through the mayor to Councillor Davey. Yeah, the key item needed for 27 Sunbridge would be further study, likely by the property owner. So as those studies are undertaken, that would help inform an updated zoning line for that property. So the timing of that could be as early as whenever those studies are completed. It could be done in the next cleanup stage of Crosby, but it likely would be a separate process from the Skippa lands.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Davey. Councillor Marsh, I believe you might have an amendment that you'd like us to consider.
I do, but first I want to ask if the property that Ms. Amanda Stellings came forward about is included in Councillor Ioannidis's amendment.
Mr. Kelly Ritz.
Through the mayor to Councillor Marsh, no, it is not. But I believe that the clerk may have some wording for that, which could either be included in this motion or brought forward as a separate one.
I was planning on putting it in with the rest of them.
When? Maybe now. How about now?
Well, I am right now. Like you beat me to the punch.
Great.
Okay.
All right. So if I may have the floor, Mr. Mayor. So yeah, I'm happy to see Councillor Ioannidis bring that forward. That's great. But I also have an amendment. Really, it's really just to speak to the fact that so many delegates from the previous meeting and the public meeting, the open house, really were upset about the word heritage being associated with their properties. And really, even though if we dropped the word heritage, it would not take away any requirements that are put on their properties by other avenues such as like the GRCA or the tree management plans that are still going to be required. I would like to respond to that request and just simply drop the word heritage from the zone, so that when people are selling their properties, for example, and the prospective buyers are looking it up, if they see the term for the zone, for the partial zone, natural heritage conservation zone instead of, natural conservation zone instead of natural heritage conservation zone, I think it speaks more to the spirit of the zone, and I find that the word heritage is unnecessary. So if I could ask staff to bring that up. It's there at the bottom.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will come to you for a seconder on that in a moment, but I do see two staff hands up. I'm not sure if they're on this. So Ms. Fusco.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Council. So I was just pointing out that Councillor Ioannidis did not have a seconder for the original amendment. And then I have added the amendment with respect to 658 Sterling Avenue South. So if we have a seconder for that, we can proceed with Councillor Marsh's amendment as well.
Okay. So I will come back to that. I guess I was taking Councillor Ioannidis as being part of his original motion and list, I guess, that's in front of us. But I can treat it as a separate amendment. And Mr. Kelly Ritz, you had a comment?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To you, I think I can hold off for now. Maybe if you can come back to me, I can expand a little bit more on a couple items from the first, from Councillor Ioannidis' motion regarding the Region of Waterloo properties that haven't spoken about yet. So we can come back to that.
Okay, I will come back to that. So first of all, do I have a seconder for Councillor Ioannidis' amendment? Councillor Michaud, thank you. And do I have a seconder for Councillor Marsh's amendment? Councillor Schneider, thank you. So I'll deal with those at the appropriate time. Next in the queue, I have Councillor, everything's bouncing on me. Councillor Singh, you're next.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just had the comment for Councillor Marsh's amendment. So either I can say now or come back.
You're the only one in the queue right now, so please go ahead.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah, I support Councillor Marsh's endeavor to change the name. I think in this action, essentially, we are in effect recognizing that, heritage designations do have some negative impacts to property owners, or at least giving that impression. And that's why we're ensuring that this doesn't necessarily give that same impression to these residents whose properties were initially being designated natural heritage conservation. And I think we need to apply the same sense of sensitivity and understanding in other parts of the city when we're dealing with other matters too, when it comes to heritage, and have that wider perspective. But I appreciate Councillor Marsh's approach on this and support her.
Thank you. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, through the mayor. I'll support Councillor Marsh's amendment as well, although I am going to just, flag a concern that I have, that 400 letters went out with a heritage designation part of this, and now we're going to do this at the last minute, and I'm curious as to how many people at that public meeting commented about the heritage. I'm just curious about the transparency part here, because we did send all those letters out and now we're changing them, kind of in the final hour, but I will still support it.
Is you, Mr. Kelly Ritz?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Michaud and rest of council. As noted during the committee meeting on March 9th, the wording natural heritage conservation for the NHC1 zoning trickles down from higher level provincial, regional, and city policy. And having consistent terms helps build a clear and transparent zoning bylaw. If council wishes to delete the word heritage, this is certainly something that we can implement tonight if a motion is passed. I will note, kind of to Councillor Michaud's perspective, that most property owners who raised concerns about the use of the word heritage were those who lived at addresses included in Councillor Ioannidis's motion to remove the NHC1 zone from their properties. So in other words, regardless of the name, the NHC1 zone would not apply to these properties.
Okay, thank you. So I don't see any other, oh, I do. Okay, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, it's just a procedural question regarding, how we go about introducing zoning changes to this in such a large area, scope, etc. Would it be possible, I know it's not going to happen this time around, but to inform all residents of the city how their property is zoned? Because people don't know, and only those that received a letter will now know that we're changing the zoning on their property. But it would be useful, I think, for all the residents of the city to be reminded, if they don't already know, what their zone is and what it allows for. So I was just surprised that it was just a certain number, like 400 or whatever it was, that were notified of changes, but the rest of the population wasn't. So I don't know if that's something to consider in the future.
So I'll let staff respond to that, but I think there is, there were a variety of tools that were utilized in order to inform people, including advertising and other means. But Mr. Kelly-Ritz, did you want to respond to Councillor Chapman's question?
Sure, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So there were a number of techniques we used throughout the process, as discussed at our committee presentation a couple of weeks ago. So we, for more citywide approaches, we use tools like social media ads, newspaper advertisements, among other things. And then for the small number of properties, you may recall that sort of 2% number, so around 900 of them, those were ones that were going through more significant changes, and we felt it was very important to reach out to those folks directly to make sure they were informed of the changes. So they all received letters and were invited to our open house as well, and we did engage with many of those residents.
So just for clarity, out of that 900, about 400 were with respect to what up till now has been called Natural Heritage Conservation Zone NHC1, and the other 500 or so were for other issues that were identified and that you communicated with those residents on. Is that correct?
To you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gazzola, question.
Not a question. I just this is quite a bylaw we're passing, so I would like to request a recorded vote.
Okay, just on the main motion or on
the main motion?
Amendments too?
I would like to actually deal with Councillor Marsh's amendments separately, but other than that, you can call them all together.
Okay, that's fine. So with that, Mr. Kelly-Ritz, was there anything else, or have you covered off the points that you wanted to make already? I think there were some additional things you wanted to speak to, or no?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we could have the clerk pull up the Councillor Ioannidis's motion again, and specifically items, believe 5, 6, and 7. Did not speak to those when I was first explaining what that included, so I can just bring that up for council's information. Thank you. So yes, 2 members of council, items 5, 6, and 7 pertain to changes requested by the region of Waterloo through their submission at Planning Committee on March 9th. And so included in Councillor Ioannidis's motion are the changes they've requested, and this would be included in those changes. And I'm happy to expand on any more detail for these changes if requested.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I don't see any other hands up. I'm just going to make a brief comment, and that is to note that the work that we're dealing with tonight, quite frankly, is a new zoning bylaw that replaces 85-1, which was originally approved in 1985, so 37 years ago. Our staff team has been working on this new bylaw with the community for, I believe, if I remember correctly, the last 7 years to get us to this point where we have a new zoning bylaw to guide us going forward. And this really is an opportunity to acknowledge the work of the current staff team, as well as those who preceded them, in order to update this zoning bylaw and give us a foundation which will help guide us going forward. And so I wanted to thank them for all of their work, as well as to thank the many residents who engaged during various phases of this work in the public processes. It obviously is an important part of what occurred, and want to thank people for taking the time. Clearly, I think, particularly as we look at things like the Natural Heritage Conservation Zone, or as proposed now would be called the Natural Conservation Zone, and so on, that I think council really endeavored to hear your concerns and make sure that they were being addressed this evening. So with that, Ms. Goss, I see you put your hand up. I hope we didn't say anything incorrect. Nope. Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Goss. Oh, you're muted.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, because there are proposed changes to the proposed bylaw on the floor, we would request that 2 clauses be added to the motion this evening, and the clerk does have them prepared. They are the same clauses that were added to a previous application earlier this evening. One speaks to pursuant to section 3417 of the Planning Act as amended, further notice is not required to be given in respect to the city initiated zoning bylaw amendment. And that in accordance with the Planning Act, section 45, applications for minor variances and zoning bylaw amendments shall be permitted on the lands that are subject to the bylaw that's before you this evening. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So appreciate you clarifying that, Ms. Goss and Councillor Chapman. I will, and Councillor Singh, I will take that as being included in your main motion. And is that, you're okay with that? Yep. Thank you. I see both of you nodding your heads. So I will deal with first Councillor Marsh's amendment as a recorded vote, and then I will deal with the Councillor Ioannidis's motion, and then the main motion going forward. So with that, I'll start with Ward 1 this time, and that would be Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I'm in favor.
Councillor Schneider.
In favor.
Councillor Gazzola.
Opposed.
Councillor Michaud.
In favor.
Councillor Galloway Seelock.
I'm opposed.
Councillor Galloway Seelock.
I just went.
Oh, did I reverse you guys? No? Okay. Okay, Councillor Michaud, I got. So next would be Councillor Singh. Sorry.
I'm in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
In favor.
Councillor Johnson.
In favor.
Councillor Chapman.
Opposed.
Councillor Marsh.
In favor.
And I'm in favor as well. So that is carried. So now I'll deal with Councillor Ioannidis' amendment. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. And now I'll do a recorded vote. We'll, instead of calling it the back end, we'll call it the New Year's countdown. And so we'll start with Ward 10. Councillor Marsh.
In favor.
Councillor Chapman.
In favor.
Councillor Johnson.
In favor.
Councillor Ioannidis.
In favor.
Councillor Singh.
In favor?
Thank you. Councillor Galloway Seelock.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Michaud.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Gazzola.
In favor.
Councillor Schneider.
You got it. In favor.
Councillor Davy.
In favor.
And I'm in favor as well. So that is carried as well. Congratulations, everyone. And again, just thank you to staff for all of the hard work on this over many, many years. We will now move forward. Just bear with me for 1 second. We will now move forward to reports of the committees. Community and Infrastructure Services, Councillor Marsh, over to you.
It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Schneider that the items listed on the agenda under Community and Infrastructure Services be adopted.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? If not, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Okay, moving on. Planning and strategic initiatives. I'm not sure I don't think there's anything left actually on that one. So I think we're good there. So we will move on to unfinished business. There was none. Any new business? Then we'll move on to the regional council update. And I think the main point to share here, and I mean, some of it was covered off in my comments at the beginning of the meeting. But as council is aware, all of the municipal tier of municipalities are lifting their emergency declarations as of this Friday within our region. North Dumfries had previously done theirs as it was something that needed to go to their council. The region did also consider their mask bylaw at a special council meeting last week, as I've shared with you previously, and has gone consistent with the direction from the province in that respect. Other than that, I think those are the main things that I really wanted to touch on. In terms of regional council, we actually have a meeting later this week. So with that, I'll go into questions and answers. Not seeing any, we'll move into the bylaws. And before I look for a mover and seconder, I'll turn to you, Madam Clerk. Are there any additional bylaws?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to all of council, there are 4 additional late starter bylaws: an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for King Street, a zoning bylaw amendment as amended for Francis, and a zoning bylaw as amended for Crosby.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Schneider. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Galloway Seelock. Thank you. So it's been moved by Councillor Schneider and seconded by Councillor Galloway Seelock that leave be given the mover and seconder to introduce the bylaws listed and the bylaws listed on the agenda and the additional ones noted, and that the same be taken as read a first time and second time and stand referred to committee of the whole. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. It's been moved by Councillor Schneider that council resolve itself into the committee of the whole. Councillor Schneider, sorry, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Schneider, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Could I get a mover for the tenders? Oh, sorry here.
Councillor Gazzola.
I'm not seeing everyone.
Councillor Gazzola has his hand up.
Okay, Councillor Gazzola, thank you. And are there any questions for the tenders?
So you have 3 people with questions, Councillor.
Okay, Councillor Gazzola. Yeah.
And then Singh.
I want to ask a question on what I believe was the first one, which is the gas pipeline construction. I'm curious as to why there is so much staff time and supplies and materials on a contract that's being carried out by someone else. Normally, when we're dealing with a bit of staff time, it's normally in the neighborhood of $100,000 or so. This is close to $2 million with everything. So, what are we doing? What are we doing differently here?
So through Chair Schneider, in response to Councillor Gazzola's question, there is extensive gas project management time associated with these contracts. And we also have staff provide on-site inspections associated with the works. And so there is extensive staff time above and beyond what we would normally have in typical road reconstruction projects. As it relates to staff time, we do not hire third-party consultants to do this work.
Do we do any road reconstruction ourselves?
In terms of design and project management?
But no actual digging and work like that.
Correct. We do maintenance and repairs in-house through staff, but not heavy road reconstruction works.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Singh.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I will ask this question every time for the next foreseeable future until inflation seems to level itself and correct. But we're in a very unprecedented times with inflation, and all of these work, the tenders and the work have staff assessed if any of it can be deferred for a time where supply and inflation is not an extreme issue, as is right now.
So through the chair, there is a report on tonight's agenda that speaks to some temporary measures related to responding to supply chain and inflationary pressures. And one of those recommendations is related to looking at some work and deferring if needed. We do know that pricing in certain areas, is still going to continue to rise, and the expectation is that it may not get better even in terms of waiting. But it is something that we do look at and consider in terms of what kind of contingency we might need to still allow for high priority work to still proceed.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate high priority work does need to proceed, especially if it means that those costs would be higher because of further deterioration. And then even it equalizes, or even if the costs were to come down for supply and materials and labor, but then the scope of work goes up, and that's understandable. But when looking at items like the odd roof, and I'm just pointing out two, and the vehicle replacement, again, just asking, have staff assess to see, is it absolutely necessary, or are these two items something that could be perhaps deferred for a while?
Just through the chair, any item that we are bringing forward to council, we are doing that review in terms of, if it is coming in significantly over budget, there's always a question of whether it's something that we would retender. I would say that everything that does come forward to council for approval with the staff recommendation to award has gone through that process. And so that is something that we consider, but if we are recommending to award, it's that we've assessed that it is needed in terms of moving forward with it. And so we have to make those decisions well in advance in terms of bringing anything to council in terms of what that final approval might look like.
Okay, not to exasperate this point further, but I think perhaps a larger dialogue and discussion is necessary for council to get a very clear understanding exactly what type of parameters are looked at to ensure that any works proposed is absolutely necessary and is insulated due to the momentary time of inflation and supply issues. One last question regarding the specifics to the vehicles. There are 3 hybrid police interceptor SUVs. I'm assuming that's for our bylaw department. My assumption is those type of vehicles are presumptively much more expensive than just a regular car. Why can't we purchase, something that's more, cost, it's not as costly, or what's the necessity of buying something that's as pointed out, a hybrid police interceptor for a bylaw department?
So through the chair, as indicated through the budget process, we go through an extensive equipment review process where we would look at vehicles that we're replacing. In terms of the specific needs of bylaw, it's the type of vehicle that they've identified in terms of what the requirements would be. But in terms of moving to hybrid, it is something that we are trying to move towards more of the greening of our fleet. And so that is one of the things we have been looking at through that process to make sure that we are replacing, if it is a vehicle that is non-hybrid, we move to hybrid or potentially electric vehicles if it makes sense and there's available supply to do so.
No, I appreciate that. And my question wasn't necessarily for hybrid. I absolutely encourage and support that. It was more so towards when I saw the police interceptor. Wasn't sure what type of high-speed chases that our bylaw department might be doing, but that's maybe a question I need to do a little deeper with our director of bylaw. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Chapman.
Yes, thank you. My question also had to do with the vehicles. I noticed in the report, it talks about the anticipated life cycle of the vehicles that are being proposed here to be replaced. And I just wondered if staff ever looks at mileage rather than life cycle.
Ms. McGoldrick?
So through the chair, mileage is one of those criteria that we look at in terms of life cycle. These are heavily used vehicles that are on the road constantly, which is why they have a shorter life cycle than you may expect for a vehicle. But included in life cycle is also the condition of the vehicle, the amount of utilization, which also factors into the mileage, and the amount of reinvestment in terms of repair. So that's all factors that are considered as part of the criteria when we look at replacement of vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I have a couple other questions with the other projects. I thought you would deal with them one at a time, or you're going to deal with all of them together. Is that it?
Yeah, I think so, Reed.
Okay.
You ask your questions to Rich, and then we'll pass them all at once.
Yeah, the next one deals with the works for the bridges around on Wilson Ave and that. I just want to state that the budget, that's within $10,000 of the budget, so it's been postponed for a number of years already. I hope it's not postponed any longer. I just want to ask staff if they can give you some idea. Constituents have been asking, when will this get started and when will it be done?
Ms. McGoldrick?
So through you, Chair Schneider, to Councillor Gazzola, we are anticipating spring works to start should Council award the tender. So that includes site preparation works. The scope is quite large associated with this project, so it involves creek restoration, pedestrian bridge replacement, trail works, as well as removal of a gas main and water main. And so there are stages associated with the works. This does have, it will be completed this year, likely in the fall. So everything should be available for public use by spring of next year.
Fine, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and I have a question on Greenfield, the Greenfield Avenue work.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Yeah, I've had a number of questions from residents concerning a number of trees that have been cut in the area. I wonder if staff can just, I know staff have given me an answer, but I wonder if they could just repeat the answer, just so people know what's involved and that we're just not going out and willy-nilly cutting trees. So can staff respond to that?
Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, I don't believe I was copied on that correspondence, so it will take me a little while to contact somebody to get the correspondence and say it publicly.
Okay, I'd appreciate if we could before just to let people know, why it is necessary sometimes to cut the trees. Okay. Thank you. I had a question on the SUVs also. I was surprised at the price, but when you say they're hybrid, that means that they are electric vehicles. Is that correct? No?
Ms. McGoldrick?
So they are hybrid vehicles. So they run on electric and gasoline. Yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you. So we are moving to electricity. Yes, thank you.
Okay. So Councilor Gazzola, would you like to wait for the answer before we?
No, go ahead. We have to go ahead with the project. It just people see the city cutting down trees and they wonder what's going on, and that's all. Just to inform the public.
Yeah. Would you like to share what you heard, or would you rather stop?
Yeah, it was something that they're only taking down what they have to do, and according to the engineering and alignment. So I'm not good in engineering, so but that's what it's to do. They're not. The answer is they're not taking down the trees just to make it easy. They're only taking them. They only take it down when it's absolutely necessary to cut it down.
Okay. So all in favor of moving the tenders? Great, thank you. We move on to administrative reports for the funding support for the museum. Do we have a mover on that? Councillor Davey, thank you. Any questions? Okay. All in favor? Okay, thank you. Moving on to the Streamlined Development Approval Fund. Mover, Councillor Ioannidis. Any questions? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? For the temporary supply chain.
Councillor Schneider, Councillor Gazzola had his hand up there, so I'm not.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to raise the question. I'm amazed that every time I read something here, there's another grant for this or a grant for that. Is there anywhere we can be provided with a listing of all of the grants that we received or are receiving? Now, I asked staff recently for whether any applications had been made for a grant to honor the Queen's Jubilee in the community, and no one seemed to have any idea whatsoever about those particular grants. So I'm just curious as to there just seems to be no end or flow of grants. So is there any way we can sort of be provided with all of the grants that we're receiving and the amounts of funds that we received? I don't want to put a lot of paperwork on staff, but just a 1 or 2 page list would be helpful.
So through the chair, that is something that staff could take away and certainly provide an information report to council at a future date in terms of providing a listing of the funding that we received over the last number of years.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, moving to the temporary supply chain measures, a mover for that. Councillor Ioannidis, any questions? Councillor Marsh?
Yeah, I am happy to support this. I just am wondering, will we be receiving a for information only item every once in a while to know what was approved through delegated authority?
So through the chair, that's correct. The quarterly information reports the council receives on a regular basis will contain any projects that would be put through in terms of these temporary measures. And so, transparency would still be part of the process in terms of providing that information for council and for the public as well. And so that would come during the normal course in terms of when those quarterly reports come forward.
Okay, that sounds good. And it sounds like even outside of the current context that we're having to put this in for, this temporary measure in for, it sounds like we can look to streamline our process even further for on a permanent basis going forward. So can can you tell us, is staff looking to find ways to streamline the process so that it isn't such a long wait, you know, even outside of the current context?
So through the chair, staff have been doing a review of the purchasing bylaw, and it is something that is planned to come back to council in June. And so there would be recommendations in terms of changes to what that looks like. So there is sort of that body of work that's been underway for quite a while, and that will come back. And certainly, you know, this is specific to this year in terms of temporary measures that we think are needed, just given the supply chain and inflationary pressures that we're seeing.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that forward. I'm glad that we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Councillor Gazzola.
I just want to state that I'm not in favor of going in this direction. I think this is an issue that we're going to be facing in the next months, several months, going on to years. And I think it's something that the council needs to be well aware of what is happening. We need to see it. We need to see it every week or every month when we deal with these issues. I'm not in favor of streamlining in this direction, because we really do lose track of what's going on, and when it's not there for us to have some discussions, it seems to move very quickly past us. So I mean, we can streamline everything, get rid of all of council. We could really streamline, but I don't think that's the direction we want to go. So I would, I can't, if someone could explain to me what we're going to lose or what's going to happen if we don't go down that streamlining path, you know, does it mean that we're going to have to do a little bit more homework when we're dealing with these issues? You know, if so, so be it. But what is going to happen? Is there going to be a huge delay on a decision being made that doubles the price of something? I don't think that will happen. So I would like to be kept in the loop. So when we come to the end of this, I'd like a recorded vote on it, if we could, please. Thank you.
Mr. Reedman.
Thank you, Chair Schneider. And yeah, really the challenge is that the provincial funding is for 1 year allotment, and some of these planning processes will take a bit of time. And so coming back to report to council on a tender for them, you know, we'll lose a month or two out of that full cycle. And so what we may end up losing in the end is reimbursement from the province and other levels of government on projects that could be fully funded by them.
Any further questions, Councillor Gazzola?
No, I do not. No, thank you. I don't have a problem every now and then that you have to make a rush decision, but it can't be that every decision we're going to make for the next 2 or 3 years is going to involve a government grant that we might or might not lose. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Gazzola. Councillor Davey. Oh, I think you might be muted, Councillor Davey.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you. I think I unmuted myself twice. Anyway, I'm struggling with this a little bit, but I understand where staff's coming from. I just want to be clear. So it does say in the recommendation that's just the remainder of 2022. So it would automatically default to past practice. Well, I guess for the new council, correct?
So through the chair, that's correct. These would be measures for 2022. And so after that, it would be whatever the purchasing bylaw requirements are. And as the reporting indicates, we do think it's temporary measures. Any kind of permanent change would be done through, you know, a comprehensive review of the bylaw and not through extending these measures. The one thing I will speak to in terms of the benefit is that time in terms of it takes for award and to bring something to council formally. You know, typically we are hearing from vendors that they are challenged to hold pricing, and so they're building that into what we're receiving. So essentially right now we're at a fairly big competitive disadvantage with the extended timelines in terms of having to bring some of those reports back. And so that's why we are recommending this, and we do believe it will help with the current sort of situation in terms of potentially getting better pricing, but still provide the transparency through the quarterly reporting as I indicated previously.
Okay, and I do recall we did, I'm going to say, loosen the restrictions or increase the delegation to staff not that long ago for the I think it was the 10%, $250,000. Do you remember how long ago that was?
So through the chair, that was part of the long-term financial plan work. So that would have been back in 2019, 2020, 2019, I believe, when it got approved. And certainly through the process of this recommendation, I don't foresee a permanent change in terms of moving in that direction. But what we do know is we are seeing those pressures due to inflation supply chain right now, and that's why we're making that recommendation as a temporary measure to deal with what we know are shortfalls in some of the budgets that we set in terms of projects, and then use the 2023 budget process to do a reset on any projects moving forward. So we wouldn't run into that same scenario in terms of making that type of recommendation to council.
Okay, thanks. Sir, two more quick questions then. So it does give the authorization to defer, well, I guess, sorry, three questions, to defer projects. So I'm assuming these would all be relatively inconsequential projects that council doesn't have a lot of vested interest in? Like
through the chair, that's certainly something that staff would consider as part of looking at various projects and where they are in terms of the priority, both for council but the community in terms of how that was set through the budget process. So it would be, sort of those what staff would term as the lowest priority type of projects that we would use if needed to provide that level of contingency. And so again, it's not necessarily that we're going to have to use all of these measures or for all types of solicitations that we would be looking for that authority, but where it does make sense, where we're seeing some overages, that's when we would use it.
Okay, and as asked before we be notified. So second last question, I'm running out of time. It does also authorize staff to transfer funds between projects, I'm assuming that would mean surpluses. So I guess I'm worried that that part of it could increase our year-end, well, I'm assuming a deficit. Is that a safe assumption?
So through the chair, so it wouldn't increase, our year-end position. We would look within the capital budget itself. And so if we had a project, it would be capital funds that we normally would close out to the reserve. Right. What we're recommending here is we essentially would transfer, rather than sending that back to the reserve ahead of the budget process, which we typically do, we would look during the year, if needed, within our set of projects that were approved by council and do that transfer if more funding was needed from a contingency point of view to allow something that might be higher priority to proceed.
Okay. And last question, I don't recall the exact report from 2019, 2020, not to put you on the spot, but presumably for a lot of these bids, we're competing against other municipalities in some sense. Do you recall from that report, because if this makes logical sense to save money now, we might have to extend it, but do you recall if we are more restrictive or more loose than our competing municipalities? If you don't know the answer, that's fine.
So through the chair, in terms of bringing recommendations forward that are within budget, I know we are, on the more restrictive side than many municipalities. I know City of Cambridge, for example, has a requirement that anything that is within budget gets approved and is reported through an information report, similar to what these measures are proposing. In terms of the budget control, I think there is a variety of when we did the scan of municipalities, some which are higher than us in terms of flexibility, and others that may be a little more restrictive. And so it is sort of, I think, the middle range that we landed on in terms of when we set that policy. Certainly right now, I think you are seeing other municipalities that are looking at similar challenges. And so they are also considering what processes they might have to revise in terms of addressing some of these issues.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to point out that the points made out by Councillor Gazzola are absolutely valid. Although I understand that due to the circumstances with supply and inflation, that this is a temporary measure. But at the same time, it does give me concern also, especially because not that, particularly for myself, that I have any concern for trust or consideration of good judgment by staff. But for the public, it does, have a degradation of public trust because everything's not having that typical oversight. So although that council would receive a report, would that report be as part of a public document whenever a change is made or a decision made by staff regarding procurement policy?
So through the chair, the quarterly reports that we do bring to council right now, they're listed based on items that are within budget under the limits that are set within the procurement bylaw. what we're proposing here is that it would actually include anything, both those projects that you normally receive plus any projects that we would use these temporary measures. So it would still be very transparent from a public point of view. And in terms of the awards and what's provided, that's also available on the city's website. So we believe that transparency is still provided through these recommendations, and it's not compromised at all in terms of what we're recommending. And certainly that would continue to be our goal in terms of providing that information to council.
Well, because there's a lot more provisionary powers given through delegated authority regarding this, I would just hope that those documents are easily accessible by the public, so that we take every steps possible to be clear and transparent. And I appreciate staff are already doing that. Just we want to make sure that we're more forthcoming and those documents are more accessible. I'll just keep as a last comment. Again, with new term of council, this is 1 year exception being given. I would hate to see a future report coming back and saying, hey, you know what, we learned a lot. And so I think, staff can continue on enjoying some of this delegated authority to make further authorizations depending on minor changes. I think the approach that we have is sound, it's good, based on the delegation authority that's been given in the past. And further delegation authority would be a slippery approach, irrespective of that short-term temporary measure being given by council for now. So I would hate to see more being provided out of this temporary measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Mayor Bravanovic.
Thank you very much, Chair Schneider. And just very briefly, I mean, I will support this. I mean, I share, the concerns around making sure that we find and strike that right balance around the role of council versus the role of staff. I'm willing to support this for two reasons. Number one, it really is only 9 months for the balance of this year that we're talking about until it would have to be brought back and considered by the new council. And I think secondly, particularly for the new members of council, there will hit a point at some point this term where in fact staff do have to have some extra latitude as well, because we will become a lame duck council because of an election year. And there's various things that kick in at various points around that. And so having that added flexibility is important this year. So those things combined, coupled with the state of inflation and wanting to make sure we get the best possible value for our ratepayers, I think this makes sense. But as has been noted, it does need to come back, and ongoing reporting, as has been committed to, is an important part of this process for the balance of the year.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Bravanovic. Well, a recorded vote has been called on this, so we'll start with Ward 1, Councillor Davey.
I'm in favor.
And we'll go to Ward 3, Councillor Gazzola.
Opposed.
Councillor Michaud.
In favor.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Singh.
In favor.
Councillor Ioannidis.
In favor.
Councillor Johnson.
In favor.
Councillor Chapman.
In favor.
Councillor Marsh.
In favor.
Mayor Bravanovic.
In favor.
And I'm in favor, so that passes. Okay. The applications for cancellation, refund, and reduction of taxes. Can I get a mover on that, please? Councillor Davey. Councillor Gazzola, you have a question.
Yeah, I have a question that relates to a resident in the ward that I represent, who, for some reason, there was a gross error in their last reassessment. I'm not sure what year the last reassessment by impact was. Now, they didn't catch this error during the months of COVID. I'm sure a lot of people missed a lot of things. And so they've now have applied for a refund. It's hardly to call a refund. It's they were grossly overcharged on their taxes, and So they're, and they've been told that they're only eligible to get 2 years of this refund back. And the overpayment was about, from what I understand, about $7,200 a year. Now, $14,000 is too big a penalty to pay, especially after going through this pandemic, where people may have missed the odd thing that they should have done. To me, that's too harsh a penalty. And so when we're dealing with this, I'd like to know what can be done to help these people. We've heard a lot about equity for all tonight. We've heard a lot of that. So,
Mr. Lautenbach?
So through the chair, I can't get into specifics related to an individual tax situation for a customer, but what I can say is when there is a gross error, which is outlined in the report as one of the reasons for an adjustment, there is specific legislation within the Municipal Act and the Assessment Act that restricts the period in which you can go back in terms of make adjustments. And so that's 2 years plus the current year. And so it's clear from an Assessment Act point of view and the way that MPAC interprets it. And so those errors are issues related to some assessment that then gets corrected. But staff have limited ability in terms of what we can do within the current legislation because it is very clear in terms of what that process is.
I can appreciate that, and we can go and relate the problem to the provincial government. But what is fair here? How do we? These people? It was a question of the assessments were to be decreased by 17%. I understand, and on this particular one, instead of a minus 17, they forgot the dash, and they got a positive 17, and have ended up for 4 years having to pay an additional $7,200, and now we're only going to give them back half of that. That's not equity. That's not fair. There's got to be some kind of way that we can deal with that, regardless of what the provincial legislation says. There has to be some kind of avenue that we can deal with.
Mr. Lautenbach, just a question. If it was reversed and a citizen underpaid, would that 2-year back limit be the same, or could we go back farther?
There's specific legislation to the chair. There's specific legislation that we follow in terms of adjustments, specifically related to Section 357 and 358, which is what this report relates to in terms of refunds, cancellations. So in terms of additional assessment, if somebody had their property reassessed, that obviously would be captured in terms of supplementary taxes, which you can go back to a similar time frame in terms of when that valuation kicks in. I can't get into specifics related to individual account, as I mentioned, but Councillor Gazzola, I'd be happy to chat with you offline in terms of any concerns that you might have related to a particular account. The legislation, as I mentioned, is very clear in terms of both Section 357 and 358 in terms of refunds and the timing specifically related to when adjustments can be made and how far back they can go.
Thank you. I won't hold up council tonight. We need to move forward, but I would appreciate further discussion, and I hope in the fullness of time we can really live up to that high bar that we've set for equity. I hope we can live up to that. Thank you.
Okay. So all in favor? And opposed? Okay, that carries.
I'm opposed.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Councillor
Well,
Gazzola.
I really am not opposed to the majority. The 98% of the stuff that's on the list is straightforward, legitimate things, but I'm opposed to that. Those two. Thank you.
Okay, and I will ask the clerk, are there any items to be considered from caucus?
Through the chair, there is one item arising out of today's caucus meeting for 91 Moore lease agreement. I will share my screen.
Okay. Okay, and do I have a mover for this? Councillor Ioannidis, thank you. All right, and all in favor? Okay.
Move that the committee rise and report.
Right. It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Michaud that the proceedings and the recorded pecuniary interests and conflicts taken in the meeting of the committee of the whole held this date as attached here to and forming part of these minutes be and the same are hereby adopted and confirmed.
All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. It's have someone to move third reading of the bylaws.
Yeah, I have a question. I've had my hand up. I have a question on a couple of the reports that are attached to our agenda.
Okay, that was under, so I'll turn it back to Councillor Schneider because that would have been part of his portion of the meeting.
Well, I had my hand up, but he missed it. That's okay.
I'm sorry, Councillor Griswold.
That's okay.
Must have been lost in the clouds there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Councillor
Oh,
Griswold.
okay. No, it's on the, we've included with the package as a statement of remuneration. I have a couple of questions. The mayor's salary of $152,000 a year, does that include what the remuneration for sitting as a regional councillor?
Who would like to answer that? Mr. Lautenbach?
So through the chair, the region also does a similar report in terms of regional related expenses. And so that captures any other regional specific considerations related to the mayor.
So it's included separately there. It's not included here also, right?
This would be specific to the city and any committees or boards that would be related to the city specifically.
Yeah. Okay, my second question is on the remuneration for members of council. The remunerations range from $80,477 to $62,597. That's a 28% differential. I happen to be the $62,597. And I'm just questioning something that I've been questioning for a large number of years, and I want to question again whether this is equity for all. I'll leave that with staff and whoever. Thank you.
So through the chair, just to respond to that, the actual salary is the same for all of council members. The employment benefit column actually is what's making up that difference, and so there are things like RRSP contributions that individual councillors may decide to make. And so that's why there are differences in terms of the total amount. But in terms of the actual salary, it's listed in one specific column ahead of the employment benefits, which provide for that difference in terms of what's reported.
Why should there be differences in taxable benefits? Why should not everyone be treated the same?
Everyone has similar opportunities in terms of what the options are for them. What the difference is depending on what options they decide to exercise. And so RRSPs, as a good example, if there is a certain contribution level that's provided, where some make that contribution, others don't, that would be the difference that you would see in terms of those amounts.
No, it's a question of ageism. After a certain age, people are not allowed to put money into RRSPs, but they should be given the opportunity to put an equivalent amount into TFSAs and thereby pay their tax on it. So it's a question of ageism. I'd like staff to look into that and council. Thank you.
Okay, so we're officially
We're officially out of that.
Okay, so you can move on and take over. That's great, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Schneider, for chairing that portion. So do I have a mover for third reading of the bylaws? Councillor Ioannidis, seconded by Councillor Galloway-Seelock. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And a motion to adjourn. And we're done before 11. This is wonderful. Councillor Michaud and Councillor Johnson, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thanks, everyone, for a great meeting and discussion, and have a wonderful evening.